Hello, Blythe, Evie, Joe, Jack, Callum, Cadence, Lucy, Orion, and anyone else who's listening. Welcome to Story Time. Today we will be reading My First Fairy Tales by Tomie Depaola. Remember, we recently read Tomie Depaola's The Art Lesson. Well, this is 4 different fairy tales that he is telling and illustrating. So let's begin. The first one is The Princess and the Pea. Once upon a time, there was a prince, and he wanted a princess. But she had to be a real princess. He searched everywhere, but still he did not find her. Look at him looking out the window of his castle. Then, one stormy night, the king heard a knock on the castle door. He opened it and saw a princess standing in the rain. He invited her in, but the queen did not believe that she was a real princess. Now, what do you think a princess is doing out in the rain all by herself? The queen laid a pea at the bottom of the princess's bed. Then she piled 20 mattresses and 20 blankets on top of it. Only a real princess would be able to feel the pea through all of that. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine having to climb up that to go to sleep? I'd be afraid I'd fall off. The next morning, the princess told the queen that she felt as if she had slept on a giant rock. Then the queen knew that the prince had finally found his princess. The two were married at once and lived happily ever after. Now, this is an interesting story. It's been told a lot of different ways in a lot of different places all over the world. It's not always about a princess. Sometimes it's about an older person. Sometimes it's about an ordinary girl. But it always has to do with being sensitive. And in this particular version, it's a symbol of her royalty. That's what makes her a princess. But royalty is also a symbol for just being good and kind. Although there are some wicked kings and queens in some of the stories. But I think this story is about being sensitive to what's happening around you, and that we should always try to pay attention. So now the next story is called Rumpelstiltskin. Once upon a time, there lived a poor miller. One day, the miller happened to meet the king. "I have a daughter who can spin straw into gold," he bragged. This interested the king. He brought the girl to his castle and locked her in a room full of straw. Yikes. The miller's daughter didn't know what to do. She had never spun straw into gold. Just then, a strange little man appeared in the room. He told the miller's daughter that he would help her if she would give him her necklace. When the king arrived the next morning, he was very happy to see his new gold. He led the miller's daughter to a room filled with even more straw. "If you can spin this straw into gold, I will make you my queen," he said. "Otherwise, you will die." I wouldn't want to be his queen, would you? Soon the strange man appeared again, but this time the miller's daughter had nothing to give him. "I will spin the straw into gold if you will give me your firstborn child," he told her. She had no choice but to agree. When the king saw the gold the next morning, he married the miller's daughter at once. Soon a baby was born, and the little man came to claim the child. The new queen cried and offered him anything he wanted if he would let her keep her child. "I will give you 3 nights to guess my name," the little man said. "If you guess correctly, you may keep your child." For 2 nights the queen guessed every name she could think of, but none of them were right. Then one of the queen's servants told her about something he had seen in the woods. "I saw a little man jumping around a fire," he said. "He was singing, 'Tomorrow the queen will lose at my game. She'll never guess Rumpelstiltskin's my name.'" The next night the queen asked the man, "Is your name Rumpelstiltskin?" "Who told you that?" the man shrieked. Then he stomped around the room and right out the door, and that was the last time anyone saw him. This is an interesting story too, don't you think? Why in the world would the miller lie about his daughter being able to make straw into gold? And why in the world would the king agree to marry her if she could do it? But if she couldn't, he was going to kill her. And then who is this silly man who can make straw into gold? And why does he want her child? Those are all pretty good questions, don't you think? Well, apparently this story was told after a children's game that was played that had the name in some languages Rumpelstiltskin in it. And that character, Rumpel, meant making lots of noise, and Stiltskin meant having a limp. So that game was to see who could make the most noise. So kids would jump around and hop around and bang pots and pans and whatever they could to make sound. And that's why this story was made up. So let's read another one. The 3 Bears. Once there were 3 bears who lived in a house in the woods. One morning they made porridge for breakfast. Then they went for a walk while it cooled. While the bears were gone, a little girl found the house and went inside. The girl saw the porridge and decided to try it. The porridge in the first bowl was too hot. The porridge in the second bowl was too cold, but the porridge in the third bowl was just right, and she ate it all up. Then the girl saw 3 chairs. She decided to sit down. The first chair was too hard. The second chair was too soft, but the third chair was just right. She sat in it until it broke. Next, she went upstairs where she saw 3 beds. She was sleepy from the porridge and decided to lie down. The first bed was too lumpy. The second bed was too flat. But the third bed was just right, and she fell asleep. Soon the 3 bears came home. "Someone has eaten all of my porridge and broken my chair," said the smallest bear. The 3 bears decided to see if anything had happened upstairs. "Someone's in my bed," the smallest bear cried. The bears talking woke the little girl. She jumped up and ran down the stairs, and the 3 bears never saw her again. What do you think this story is all about? Why did that little girl just walk right into their house? That's kind of rude, right? And why did she think she could just eat their food and sit on their furniture and break the baby bear's chair and then just go to sleep in their bed? Kind of rude, if you ask me. Well, this story is supposed to be a warning to children not to go too far away from home and not to just walk right in someplace. And the fact that she likes the baby bear's porridge, she likes the baby bear's chair but ends up breaking it, and then likes the baby bear's bed, is supposed to show that she is just a very young child and doesn't know any better. So, the last story, The Elves and the Shoemaker. Once there was a shoemaker. He was so poor that he could only afford enough leather to make one pair of shoes. The shoemaker laid the leather on his table to use the next day and then went to bed. The next morning he came downstairs and found that the leather had been turned into a beautiful pair of shoes. Soon a customer arrived. He loved the shoes so much that he paid the shoemaker enough to buy leather for 2 more pairs of shoes. Wow. That night, the shoemaker set out his new leather and went to bed. The next morning, he found 2 beautiful pairs of shoes on his work table. They were even more beautiful than the first. This continued for many nights. Finally, the shoemaker and his wife decided to hide in the shop to see who was making the shoes. At midnight, 2 little men crept into the shop. They turned the leather into shoes and left without a sound. The shoemaker's wife thought for a moment and then said, "Those little men have done so much for us. The least I can do is make them some clothing, and you can make shoes for them." The next night, the shoemaker and his wife laid out the clothes and waited. Once again, the little men came into the shop at midnight. They put on their new clothes at once and then danced and sang. "Now we're boys so fine and neat. Why make shoes for others' feet?" And with that, they disappeared and were never seen again. So that story is about making the best of what you have and being grateful for what other people do for you to help you. And so now the shoemaker's able to make more pairs of shoes, and they're able to make it on their own. I hope you found those stories interesting. It was fun for me to look up the meaning behind all of them. I hope you are still taking good care of yourselves, that you're loving on each other, and that you love yourselves no matter what, just the way you are, because each one of you is special enough to be a fairy tale yourself. And never forget, I love each one of you to the moon and back. We'll be back together tomorrow for more stories in story time. Bye-bye.